Hi there, I'm Mike Ronald and welcome to this edition of Mike's Money Clip, brought to you by Ronald Financial Services. A question my mates often ask me is, Mike, what do I do with some spare cash? Now, an instinctive answer to that is, give some of it to me. But on a more serious note, there's a great rule of thumb which we can apply in these circumstances. If you need to access the money within 5 years, it's better to reduce your debt. If you need to only access the money after 5 years, then it's better to invest it. How did we come to this rule of thumb? Well, it all hinges around the amount of time that you need to access your debt. Let's say, for example, you've put 10,000 Rand aside, which you want to place down as a deposit on a new car or even use as a holiday next year. When the next year arrives, you want to be absolutely sure that you can access that 10,000 Rand plus a little bit of income. And so in the short term, it's better to either use a high interest-bearing money market call account or reduce your debt. And how did we come up with choosing debt? Well, let's have a look at an example. Let's say you have got the 10,000 Rand that we mentioned earlier spare, and you also have debt of 50,000 Rand. It might be in a credit card. A bank will offer you around 7% at the moment for your cash, and you'd be paying the bank at least 10.5% on your debt, which means at the end of the year you'd earn 700 Rand from your spare cash, and you'd have to pay the bank 5,250 Rand for your debt, leaving you out of pocket by 4,550 Rand. If instead you took the money out of the cash and used it to reduce your debt, you would only have 40,000 Rand debt, and you'd only have to pay the bank 4,200 Rand a year, leaving you 1,050 Rand better off than what you were before, which is better than the 700 Rand that you would have earned on your spare cash, which is why we say debt is better, but so long as you can access the cash from your debt afterwards. So let's look at the case where we only need to access the money after 5 years. Here we need to take into account the effects of inflation. You see, inflation erodes the value of money. Let me give you an example. If you had to take your 10,000 Rand and place it under the mattress and keep it there for 5 years, at the end of those 5 years, that money would only be worth 3/4 of what it was when you started. And unfortunately, the interest that call accounts give you isn't enough to combat the effects of this inflation. Old Mutual did some studies and looked at returns earned by companies on the stock exchange, interest on call accounts, and government bonds, and they went back to 1929. And since that period, they discovered that interest on call accounts would only give you 0.8% per annum over what inflation was. That is hardly combating the effects of inflation, and you're earning no real income from it. Investing in a company or a series of companies on the Johannesburg Stock Exchange, however, gave you a return of 7% per annum over inflation, indicating that for longer periods of time, investing is the better option when it comes to dealing with spare cash. So let's recap. Remember our great rule of thumb. If you need to access the money within 5 years, it's better to reduce your debt. If you only need to access the money after 5 years, it's probably better to invest. We hope you've enjoyed this edition of Mike's Money Clip, brought to you by Ronald Financial Services.